Welcome. I'm Dr. Jesse Morse, and you're listening to the 14th episode of the Eternal Vitality Podcast. I am a double board certified physician practicing in Miami. Primary board is family medicine, and my secondary board is sports medicine. I have a very unique practice in Miami called the Osteopathic Center that I joined in 2020, and we focus on getting to the root of the problem. I was used to traditional medicine and a lot of band-aiding and just giving people medicines that, in my opinion, usually managed care. And I wasn't happy with the results, just watching things have a tendency to worsen. When it comes to issues with the joints or with tissues, ligaments, and tendons, I had significant concerns as to where the tissues were going. The severity of the injuries were just, declining or worsening, and the quality of the tissues were declining. And I'm like, cortisone and gel and high blood pressure meds, none of this is actually the root problem in getting out. So what I realized was, hey, I need to start looking deeper and then actually figure out what's going on and go from there. So that's kind of what I've been doing the past 4+ years. And one of the things I came across a couple months ago was a list called the Dirty Dozen. Now, this is put out by an organization every year since 1995 called the EWG, which is the Environmental Working Group. And this is the list of the fruits and vegetables that have the highest number of pesticides. Now, before I go into that, if you haven't been here before, I try to cover topics that maybe aren't covered in traditional medicine or you might not know about, or things that are trying to improve your health in one way or another, whether it's injections for the knee and different products that you can use for different joints to help improve the quality of the tissue and pain, maybe prevent surgery. We've talked about quote-unquote stem cells and PRP. We've talked about different cool brain function optimizers like methylene blue. We've talked about an old school classic therapy that's been around since the 1800s, really before that, that we talked about last week called ozone. That is an amazing drug, really a form of oxygen that can fix so many different problems, unfortunately just not properly utilized in the United States, and so many other topics, peptides, and so on and so forth. So if you have interest in any of these areas and you like this type of topic, I'll start covering some more longevity stuff soon. But in general, do me a favor and check out some of the other episodes, whether it's on YouTube channel, whether it's on Spotify or Apple or Google or wherever you listen to your stuff. It will be on there. Just search for Eternal Vitality and you will likely find it. This one's going to be a little shorter because I kind of want to make it compact. And I also want to cover the second half of this list called the Clean 15 in next week's episode. So let's get started. This list is found on ewg.org. Just Google it. It is very easy to find. It's called the Dirty Dozen. Just type in Dirty Dozen and pesticides. So every year, this group analyzes over 46,000 samples of 46 different fruits and vegetables. That is a ton of things to check. Now, these pesticides are measured in parts per million. It's important to understand that the agriculture industry in the United States has a significant power and lobbyists, and they generate billions, maybe more than that, of money a year. But the soil in the United States is very poor, and the pesticides used on all these different fruits and products and vegetables and grains that we consume every day are not meant for human consumption. Their goal is to prevent the decay and maybe optimize the size and maybe the quality of that food. But unfortunately, these things are not meant for human consumption. So a lot of the times they cause issues. And a lot of times we don't know what the issues are until 10, 15, 20 years down the road. Or maybe we never know what ends up happening. But these things are not really supposed to be in our body And as a result, we're accumulating these toxins over time. Pesticides are tightly regulated by the USDA, and a report shows that over 99.5% of conventional produce are well below the threshold. But the question becomes, that's one given sample. What if you eat this fruit every day, or this vegetable or whatever it is every day, multiple times a day, and you don't get rid of it? At what point does that pesticide low level become a high level and a risky level? That's where I have my concerns with it. And a lot of the times we have all these weird diseases that we really still don't know where they come from or how to fix them. You have Alzheimer's and Parkinson's and all these weird neurological disorders. There's cancers like crazy. I had a 32-year-old patient today that has stage 4 colon, or really rectal cancer. He's 32. That's insane. Like, we used to never really see any cancers below 35 unless you have the random pediatric ones. Now we're starting to see a ton in the 30s and early 40s. It's just crazy. And my concern is that pesticides, all these different toxins, all these different things in our environment to help probably make more money for one of the industries is destroying, unfortunately, our health. And then it's too late. Life is precious, and as far as I'm concerned, you only have one of them. So, you can have all the money in the world, but what good is it if you're in pain, if you are sick, or if you're dying? I'm sure people who have all the money in the world, but if they can't live, they'll trade all of that for be healthy. So it's a fickle beast. But my goal with this specific episode was to just discuss which foods that maybe you try to avoid, or try to get the organic version, to try to limit the pesticide exposure for you and your family, for your loved ones, so that you can see your child grow up. You can see your mom and dad, or your husband or wife grow up and continue to live a healthier life with all this, preventing all this garbage in their system. At the end of the day, it's a product choice between this one and this one. Yes, it may be a little bit more money now, but what price are you saving in the future? So let's start with number 12. At the end, I will kind of do a quick breakdown of all of them, but I'll kind of discuss each of them very quickly. So number 12 kind of surprised me, because I did not expect this to be on the list, but it's green beans. This was what I consider the best of the worst, meaning it was the least toxic of the 12, but it is tainted by a pesticide that the EPA has banned over 10 years ago, called acephate, which is a neurotoxin, and over 90% of the green beans had pesticides. 90%. So the second one is one that I love more than anything. It's a beautiful natural anti-inflammatory. It's one of my favorite fruits. And over 90% of blueberries had pesticides. Listen to this stat. Nearly 80% of blueberry samples contained 2 or more pesticides, including malathion, which has toxic effects on the human nervous system and is classified as probable as a human carcinogen, cancer-causing. Blueberries, very difficult to find pesticide-free unless they are USDA organic, and then I still have some concerns. I found one from Canada that claims they're pesticide-free. They are flash frozen at peak season. They're really tiny. They're pretty good. I happen to get mine at Costco. You can get them Instacarted. But in general, blueberries are loaded with healthy benefits, but you don't want all the garbage to come along. And some people are wondering, well, what if I just wash them? These are grown into the fruit and vegetable. You can't wash that out. Yes, you should probably dip it in vinegar. You should probably also run it through baking soda. Run it through. But at the end of the day, if it's literally baked into the actual fruit or vegetable, you're not getting it out. You may get some of the stuff on the surface out, but that's part of the concern. So let's go on to number 10, cherries. So cherries are fantastic. I love them. They're delicious, but they average 5 pesticides, including iprodione, which is also banned in Europe. You'll start to notice a trend. Europe doesn't allow these. America does. You will see this. There's over 10,000 foods that Europe has banned that America allows. If that is not a red flag, I don't know what is. Okay, moving on. Bell and hot peppers, number 9. Now, sweet bell peppers actually happen to have the fewest of the pepper family, but the ones that did have the toxic pesticide were way more toxic than traditional pesticides. So, but I would not have guessed that peppers were on this list, but here we are. The next one is a perennial favorite, quote unquote favorite. It makes the list pretty much annually, and that's grapes. Now, and that makes me think, what about wine? And I don't know the answer to that, but that's an interesting thought. And then the next question is, how much? 96% of grapes had pesticides. That's insane. That's literally insane. There's only one more, I think, on this list that has a higher number that they commented on. Number 7 is one that I used to love picking as a kid. I grew up in Massachusetts. We had apple orchards up there, and used to go usually in October in the fall, right before it gets too cold, and you could go apple picking. You know, I personally love Honeycrisp and Granny Smiths. I still get them pretty regularly. Ideally, I try to get the organic ones, but there is over 90% of apples were found to have pesticide, or at least pesticide residues, after their harvest. And there's specifically one called diphenylamine, which was found in 80% of samples. That the goal of this specific pesticide is to help prevent the skin from developing brown or black patches. But this leads to the formation of something called nitrosamines, and these have been linked to elevated cancer in the stomach and in the esophagus. So think about that. These beautiful apples, and you're getting all this garbage that may be leading to an increased risk of cancer just because of the healthy fruit you're trying to eat. It's a double-edged sword, and it's like, at this point, I don't even know what to eat anymore. And I'm there with you. It's frustrating. So we can, inform ourselves and make better decisions, or move to Europe and then just kind of decide, hey, pick this over that. It looks beautiful. We're promoting your fruits and vegetables. I'm trying to eat healthy. But unfortunately, you're also getting slapped in the face with this, and you don't even know it. That's part of my goal, is to educate, to help inform. Okay, the next one that I thought, because it had kind of a shell, that I thought it would be okay, nectarines. 94% of the samples had pesticides. One sample that they evaluated had 15 different pesticides. That's bananas. Crazy. And no, bananas are not on this list. Number 5, pears. So pears can be fantastic. They get that beautiful kind of crisp outside and a nice soft in the middle. They go with different types of cheeses, but unfortunately, over 63% of pears that were tested had over 5 pesticides. That's a lot of pesticides. And I guess the good news is that a little under 40% didn't have them, but still. Now let's go to number 4. Peaches, which makes me think of the South and in Georgia, but 99% of them had residues. If you found one that was a conventional crop and not an organic that didn't have a residue of pesticide, that's insane. That's crazy. And 65% of them had at least 4 different pesticides on it. These are not just one thing. These toxic chemicals are causing problems, whether or not you want to admit it and whether or not you see it or feel it. We always wonder, how did this come about? How did this? I didn't feel it until it was too late. This stuff is causing problems in our body, whether or not we can prove it. And sometimes by the time we prove it, it's too late and you can't do anything about it. So try to prevent a lot of these beforehand. Number 3, it's actually 3 different vegetables in here or whatnot. Kale, mustard, and collard greens, which is another big staple in the South. 86% of these had 2 or more residues, including the neurotoxins imidacloprid, bifenthrin, and cypermethrin. Scary that you can have neurological issues from eating healthy greens like kale and mustard. Number 2, another super healthy green that unfortunately is loaded with pesticides, 76% of them, and including permethrin, which is a highly neurotoxic insecticide, and that is spinach. So Popeye, if he lived nowadays, would have a ton of pesticides, unfortunately. Spinach, very commonly used in salads. Some people saute it. It has loaded with vitamins and minerals, but unfortunately also with chemicals and pesticides. You don't know what you don't know, so I'm trying to help inform. I'm not the bad guy here. I'm just an informant. I am just delivering you this news. The fruit or vegetable that has the highest level of pesticides for many years in a row is one of America's favorite fruits. One of my favorite fruits that frustrates me knowing this is strawberries. Strawberries are loaded with chemicals, and it has to do with the way from my understanding, the way they grow, how quickly they decay, and those little divots in the actual strawberries that end up causing a lot of the insecticides and pesticides to stick on it. Now, there's these chemicals specifically for strawberries are linked to cancer as well as reproductive damage. This is crazy. Now, 30% of all strawberry samples had over 10 pesticides. That's insane. 30%. It is impossible to find a strawberry that doesn't have a pesticide unless it's organic, and then they have organic pesticides. It's just the way it is, which is awful, and it sucks because these are so delicious. They are loaded with healthy options, but unfortunately, all this garbage comes along for the ride. Now, there were a couple that were on the 2022 list that did not make this 2023 list. This came out in October, November. One of which was celery, which I thought was a little interesting, and the other one was tomatoes. So those were on last year's list, but are not on this year's list. They were replaced by grapes and blueberries. Now, it is important to understand that all organic fruits and vegetables use pesticides. There are about 900 different pesticides that are approved for conventional, but only 25 that are approved for organic. Be like, all right, as long as I eat organic, I won't have any issues with pesticides. Nope. There's one called rotenone that has been linked to Parkinson's disease, and this is an organic pesticide. So we can't win even if you're eating clean. So in my opinion, to kind of wrap up, how do we prevent these consumption of these, accumulation of these? Sparingly, okay, fine. But if you're eating these every day, it's probably a little concerning. And these are healthy sugars. I love fruits, but I have a tendency to gravitate to oranges, to bananas, my pesticide-free blueberries. Every once in a while, I'll eat some strawberries. But in general, I'm trying to avoid these 12 because, I'm doing what I can while also eating healthy. Now, if you choose to try to avoid getting pesticides, I would probably recommend buying USDA organic, which unfortunately is more expensive, but will be cleaner in the long run. You can also buy frozen that are picked at their peak freshness, because a lot of the times they pre-pick them. They'll put them in a truck that has a freezer or a cooler, and then they let them mature there, and that's why they aren't optimally picked, and that's why they taste gross, and they start getting all that mold and all the other stuff, which I talked about in last week's episode. All those other problems. Ideally, try to find ones that literally say pesticide free on the box or the container. You can also look for non-GMO. Very difficult to find, but you can find it. And you should try to find the ones that have no added sugars, preservatives, colorings, or flavorings. All of those are adding to the problem. If you can't pronounce it, it's probably not good for you. I'll be discussing the clean 15, which is the opposite of this, the healthiest 15, least amount of pesticides, next week. If you want to hear my thoughts, I would love for you to join me. If you like this type of content, do me a favor, hit the subscribe button, as well as maybe giving me a review on any of the sites so that you get an idea of what we're doing. I try to make these really informative, always science-backed, and give you insight that maybe you don't hear traditionally. I would love to hear what else you would like to hear. Please put that in the description below, or reach out to me on one of the social medias, and I will put it into the rotation of things I'm going to talk about. Thank you very much for watching the Eternal Vitality Podcast. We will see you next week. Take care.